Okay, so let's make progress. So I was explaining the personality point. Now, when we talk about personality, it basically refers to the relatively permanent traits that people manifest as a result of the personality refers to the relatively permanent traits that people possess as a result of birth or the environment within which they grew up. Now, typical, so there are several typologies of personality. Let me just take you through a few of them. Please mute your microphones. Okay, so still on personality, the most famous personality theory that I can use to illustrate is what we call the Big Five personality traits. So, Big Five. Please write it down, it might be useful somewhere. The Big Five personality traits. And the Big Five personality trait basically talks about 5 enduring traits which make people behave the way they do. And what are these 5 enduring traits? It includes, so that is what I've written over there as the ocean. The O stands for openness. Openness, the degree to which an individual will be open to novel and new ideas. And research indicates that individuals that score very high on an openness questionnaire tend to be more IT inclined individuals or people that tend also to be entrepreneurs because it counts with a lot of creativity. Then the C traits refers to conscientiousness, conscience. And basically, people that score high on the conscientious scale are those that have higher alertness when it comes to the operation of their conscience. So those people are the ones that always operate with their conscience at the peak. Then the E stands for extroversion. So in that continuum, you can have someone scoring high to be labeled as an extrovert, or someone scoring low on that part of the questionnaire to be labeled as an introvert. And so when we say someone is an extrovert, in terms of personality, they are people that enjoy social pursuits. So they always want to be in social situations or be in the limelight. Whereas the introverts are the ones that enjoy solitary pursuits. They always want to be operating in their idle or in a quiet fashion. Now, the A stands for agreeableness. Agreeableness, the degree to which an individual can be reasoned with. So people that score very high on an agreeable scale are those who, once you are able to present coherent and logical arguments before them, they will side with you. And people that score low on agreeable scale are the ones with a personality which does not emphasize on logic or coherence when they are making decisions. And the last personality trait, as far as the Big Five is concerned, is neuroticism, neurotic. So when we say someone has a neurotic behavior or a neurotic trait, it means they are easily angered, they are temperamental, and the same people too are highly excitable and irritable. So we are referring to the group of individuals whose mood or temperament can switch from happiness to moodiness within a twinkle of an eye. The crop of people whose mood can switch from an elated or excited mood to an irritable mood. So that is basically about the big 5 personality traits. Now, linking it to what we are doing today, we are saying that if an individual possesses a trait like openness, like conscientiousness, then when you are administering a training intervention to them, the chances that it will maximize their learning potential is high, as opposed to individuals that score lower on openness and agreeableness. Now, another aspect of personality that I also want to draw your attention to is the issue of locus of control. Locus of control. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, locus of control. Basically, when we talk about locus of control, we are referring to the degree to which individuals will provide explanations to events happening around them by attributing it to their own efforts or an external force. I'm taking it again. Locus of control basically refers to the degree to which individuals or people will interpret events or situations surrounding them by making reference to either their own efforts or external forces. Locus of control. Good. Now, research indicates that there are 2 main types of locus of control. We have the external locus of control and then the internal locus of control. Now, when we say a particular person has an external locus of control, it simply means that when these individuals are explaining things that are happening to them or things that are occurring in their environment, they make reference to external forces, such as their pastor, witchcraft, which is perhaps in their village, or maybe a supernatural force that is intervening on their behalf. So that is external locus of control. Additionally, people also make attribution to maybe their supervisor or their colleagues when they are trying to explain why they are successful or they failed on a particular task. All those things have to do with external locus of control. Conversely, when we say an individual has an internal locus of control, it simply means that these individuals try to explain the circumstances or events they find themselves in by making reference to their own efforts. So these are the individuals who will blame themselves for their success or their failures. They will never shirk that responsibility to perhaps a supervisor or witchcraft or any supernatural being. So those are the ones with internal locus of control. Let me also quickly add that another name for external locus of control is externalizer. Let me pick the pen. Externalizer. Then another name for internal locus of control will be what? Internalizer. Good. So whereas externals try to make sense of their situation or their plight by making reference to external forces, internalizers or internals rather take the blame for their success or failure, and then work harder towards amending it. Any questions so far? Do you have a question as far as the issue of personality is concerned? So far
No,
on
sir.
personality, I've spoken about the Big Five personality model, which has to do with ocean. And in addition to that, I've also made attribution to locus of control, and where I have juxtaposed externalizers with that of internalizers. So let's make progress. Now, so I've treated the personality part. The other aspects that we need to look at is attitude. Attitude. So, which is still about the trainee characteristics. When we talk about a trainee's attitude or an employee's attitude, what we simply mean is that we are referring to their evaluation, either positive or negative, about a stimuli, an event, or an object in their environment. So whenever an individual makes a positive or negative evaluation of a stimuli, an event, or an object in their environment, then we are referring to the person's attitude. And research indicates that individuals that usually have a positive attitude towards their organization or the work that they do, when it comes to their readiness for training, they tend to excel very well as compared to individuals that have a negative attitude towards their organization. Think about it this way. When you have a negative attitude simply because you think the requisite resources you need to work, or for instance, you are not being paid substantially, when they task you to go for a particular training program, you will see it as a nuisance. And so that is where research is coming from. Now, on the second option that one can use to maximize learning, let us look at training design. And when we talk about the training design, we are essentially referring to the degree to which the learning materials for a particular training program and the learning environment will be deliberately structured to maximize learning. In other words, how are you putting the training manuals and the training program together? What are the specific thematic areas you are considering to train people on? And how did you even arrive on these thematic areas? Did you get it as a result of interacting with the prospective trainees? Or you sat down in your office and thought you are an all-knowing expert? And so you just deduce it out of the moon. In the same vein, when we talk about the environment for the training program, are you making sure that it will be free from any form of interference? And are you also making sure that all the learning materials that can enhance assimilation of your training program is put in the right perspective? So all these things fall within the purview of the training design. And two main issues are very much important when it comes to the dissemination, the designing of a training program. And later on in our next two lectures, we will treat training design into great depth. But for the purpose of today's lecture, we will just tackle the issue of conditions of practice and retention of what is learned. In other words, we are being admonished that anytime you are designing a training program, irrespective of your target audience, there are two key issues that you have to pay attention to. The first issue is the conditions under which the trainees will practice what they are learning. And the second one is how you are going to make the environment intrinsically motivating so that the trainees will retain what they learned. All right, so let's pick them one by one. The conditions of practice. When we talk about the conditions of practice, basically we are referring to the various arrangements or establishments you put in place so that when your trainees are practicing what they are learning, they will be able to assimilate or push it into their long-term memory. And what are some of these issues that can enhance the conditions of the practice as far as the training is concerned? The first one is what we call active practice. Active practice. The cardinal point in active practice is that a training program should be designed in such a way that the trainees or the end recipients will get an opportunity to repeatedly perform whatever they are learning. In other words, once you present the training intervention to the trainees, you should also give them the opportunity to practice for you to get feedback as to whether they are assimilating what you are teaching or they are not actually getting it well. So that is active practice. There should be an opportunity for the trainees to practice whatever they are learning. Then the second issue also has to do with massed versus spaced practice sections. Massed versus spaced practice sessions. Now, in an attempt to design an effective training program for trainees, it is very much important to decide whether you want to conduct the entire training in just one session. So maybe one day for the entire training to be conducted. Or you will divide the training program into sub-sessions so that it will be spread across the week or maybe across the month. Research indicates that even though both mass sessions and then spaced practice sessions can lead to trainees learning whatever they are being taught, they advocate that if you have the good intention of your trainees at heart, then you have to practice what they call spaced practice session. And this is simple because by using spaced practice session, it gives them an opportunity to take their time to assimilate whatever you are teaching them so that in the long run, it will make, they will put it into its right perspective. So in general, information and skills can be learned either way, both through massed and spaced practice. But research have proven that spaced practice sessions with reasonable rest periods between them can lead to better performance and longer retention. So that is why I indicate that if you have the good intention of your trainees at heart, and you also want them to perform better, and in addition, recall whatever they have learned for a very longer period of time, then it is advocated that you go for spaced practice. And those of you who are, I'm sure most students are familiar with either of these approaches. When we talk about students using massed practice, it means that they will come for lectures the whole semester, but they will not be learning alone. They will sit down and last minute, they will do chill and pour to go and write the exams. Now, when we say students are using spaced practice, it means that after every lecture, they go back, go through the reading materials, and prepare their own notes. And this is done for all the courses that they are taking. And so by the time we get to the end of the semester, the learning materials or whatever they learned will not be too news to them, but it will be something that they have been doing over and over the period of time. Bruce, your microphone is on. Alpha, your microphone is on. Your last warning. Now, another condition of practice is also about how the course can be covered. And this deals with the issue of whole versus parts. Whole versus parts. Now, when we talk about the issue of whole versus part learning, we are basically referring to the extent to which you will design the training program to either exhaust the entire course outline that is supposed to be treated in the training program in one day, or the extent to which the course outline will be fractionalized and spread across several days. Now, the question of whether to go for whole or part learning, as far as the course coverage is concerned, depends on the quantum or volume of materials that you intend to teach your trainees. If, in your candid opinion, the material is such that it can be treated in one unit, then you can go for it. But if the nature of the material is such that treating the entire unit in a given day will be problematic, then you have to be smart enough and break it down into other units so that you will not overwhelm your trainees with a lot of information, which we call information overload. Still on conditions of practice, the fourth issue of interest is what we call overlearning. And ideally, most people have been advocating that overlearning is bad. But according to Edward L. Thorndike, if it is practiced effectively, then it can achieve desired results. And he defines overlearning as basically the degree to which one will practice beyond the point at which the material or the task is mastered. So we are basically saying that when an individual is said to have overlearned, they are basically those individuals. When we say an individual has overlearned, they are basically those individuals that have reached the point of mastering the task, but still they go on to practice it. And the rationale or argument in favor of overlearning is threefold. The first rationale is that overlearning may improve an employee's performance by helping them to develop a stronger association between parts of the task, especially when an individual is learning a material that can be broken down into units or into its sub-nuances. No, the second argument in favor of overlearning is that overlearning may provide additional opportunity for practice in using a skill or knowledge when there are little opportunities for doing so in the job settings. And a typical example is an astronaut or a pilot that is practicing to master how engine flame out will be handled. And you all agree with me that it is not very often that pilots encounter the issue of their engine flaming out. And so once they overlearn it and it gets to a situation where they actually need to demonstrate their knowledge, then they will be in a good position to do it because they have been practicing it over time, and it might come when they get to that overlearning stage, it will come to them automatically. And the reason, or the third argument for overlearning has to do with it leading to automaticity. Research indicates that when people learn to a pedestal where they have successfully mastered a task and to a point where they can even close their eyes and perform the task without any challenges, then when it gets to the point in time where they actually need to demonstrate it, they will not they will not be found wanting. So typical example is initially learning how to drive a car, and eventually when you practice it over time and you master it, you can now be driving without even by receiving calls or driving and looking at the roadside and so on and so forth. At that point, you have reached the stage where you can automatically be doing some of these things without being very much nervous. Now, the next condition of practice is knowledge of the resource, or basically the feedback. And research indicates that when trainees are given adequate feedback about their performance after the training program, then it also incentivizes them to work on their inadequacies. So basically, by providing feedback to the trainer or providing feedback to trainees after they have demonstrated what they learned, it serves as an avenue for them to learn and improve their mistakes. And by going through that processes, they are also able to retain it in their long-term memory. And the last condition of practice is what we call task sequencing. Task sequencing, the degree to which the learning materials and learning resources and the training program will be disseminated in such a way that it will not overwhelm the trainees. So in terms of the sequence, are you dividing the course coverage into 8 subunits and presenting it day after day? Again, are you also interspersing the training program with frequent breaks like coffee break or frequent pauses for group discussions and so on and so forth? Research indicates that when when training programs are deliberately designed and the task is also properly sequenced, then it can enhance not only the learning ability of the trainees, but also their ability to retain whatever they are learning. Good. Now, the next issue of interest is retention of what is learned. How do you retain information of the learning program? So it is one thing participating in a training program and learning, and it's also another thing processing it into your long-term memory so that in the near future, you can make reference to it and use it at the working environment when you get back to your office. This indicates that the goal of every training goes beyond ensuring that the trainees learn the task, but it also includes the degree to which you can influence the trainees to retain whatever they are learning. And 3 main issues are of interest as far as retention of learning materials is concerned. The first one is the meaningfulness of the material. The meaningfulness of the material. To what extent can the individual's learning make reference or relate to the materials that you are presenting to them? Some of you still have your microphones on. Okay. When we talk about the meaningfulness of material, it is the extent to which the material or the course coverage is very rich in association for the individual learner. So the more meaningful factual material is, the easier it is for the trainees or the employees to also what? Assimilate and process it into their long-term memory. And to do this, you can train the employees or the trainees to make use of mnemonic devices. You can also help them to develop their own acronyms which they can use to process whatever you are presenting to them. So for instance, I'm saying that when it comes to the issue of retaining what is learned, three main areas are of importance, and these are the meaningfulness of the material, the degree of originality of learning, and then interference. So you can create an acronym for these three issues by saying what? TTI. You can equally, depending on the salient concept of interest, you will have to create it in a way which is more user-friendly to you. And when you do that, we are saying you are making the learning material more meaningful. The second issue, as far as retention of what is learned is concerned, has to do with the degree of originality. How, to what extent is the material which is being learned original? Now, research indicates that the more effective information is initially learned, then the more likely that it will be retained. In other words, as the teaching process is going on, if the trainee make a conscious effort to learn it over there, and subsequently to they adopt whether spaced or masked approach to practice it, then the chances that it will be retained is high, as opposed to a situation where the material was not initially properly learned. So if you learn it well initially, then the chances that you'll be able to recall when the time comes is high. That is the second issue. And the third one is interference. The main object of the interference concept is that in the course of learning or teaching, whenever the process encounters some form of distraction or distortions, then it will truncate the ability of the trainees to process the information. So, typical example will be, as I am teaching now, some students will have their microphones on and it will be making a lot of noise at the background. In that regard, students might not be able to pay attention to whatever I'm saying because they are being distracted by the noise coming from the microphones which are on. That is why we mean interference. And interference can be looked from two main perspectives. Whether the initial material that was learned is interfering with the training session, or subsequent encounters in the environment is interfering with what was learned during the training issue. But irrespective of how you look at it, you will still get to the bottom of interference. All right. Transfer of training. So we have learned what learning is. We have also learned how you can maximize learning. We have also touched on how you can design a training program to maximize learning. Now we are going to look at how the issues or lessons learned during the training program can be transferred onto our job so that it will be practiced over there. In other words, when we talk about transfer of learning, we are basically referring to the extent to which information which was acquired during the training sessions can be applied to our real working environment in order to change our previous inadequacies as far as our performance is concerned. Now, research indicates that there can be three main transfer of training outcomes. You can either have positive transfer, a negative transfer, or a zero transfer. When we say there is a positive transfer, it simply refers to the degree to which one's job performance at their office or in the real work world improves as a result of a training program they participated in. So when we say there is a positive transfer, it means that we are getting value for money for footing the bill for employees to go for a particular training program. That means, having gone through the program, we are now observing that their cognition, their behavior, and their affect in the working environment is all changing to a positive angle. Nevertheless, when we say there is a negative transfer, it simply means that the performance of an individual's job is now worsening as a result of the training program they went through. And this simply might be the situation where the logistics or equipment that was used during the training program is totally different from the equipment you are actually using at your office. And so when you came back, you are trying to mimic what you learned at the training session, but it is not suitable for your equipment. And in that case, you'll be causing a lot of wastages and breakages. In that circumstance, we will say that there has been what? A negative transfer. Then you can also get a third scenario where we have zero transfer. When we say there is zero transfer, it simply means that the training intervention is not having any significant change in the job performance of the trainees after they returned to their workplace. So this indicates that when we say there is a zero transfer, the previous cognition, previous behavior, and previous affect of the employees has not significantly changed. So that is what we mean by zero transfer. And ideally, to get value for money, we should all aspire for positive transfer, because at the end of the day, our intention is to change employee cognition, behavior, and affect so that it can also have a ripple effect on their job performance and organizational success. So we should always aspire for the positive transfer as opposed to the negative and zero transfer. A distinction can also be made between near and far transfer. Near and far transfer. When we say there is near transfer, it simply means that the trainees are directly applying whatever they learned onto the job without making any adjustments or modifications. So, for instance, they learned how to drive. Maybe you went for a driving school and you were learning how to drive an automatic car. Now, when you came back to